Welcome back, and welcome to chapter on business to business and business to consumer. Let's walk through it and let's talk about how people determine in terms of purchases, whether it's B2B or B2C, and the processes that we go through in terms of searching for and finding the right choice. So let's talk about the consumer decision process. Put yourself in the driver's seat when you're looking for something. There's high involvement and low involvement. What does that mean? Think about high involvement. High involvement in terms of something that you're really invested in. A large scale purchase, a computer, a car, a home, something you're going to spend a lot of time with, versus something maybe with a little lower involvement. Maybe it's the choice of water that you purchase, the type of toothpaste, etc. And consider that as we go through this chapter. So all of the time in terms of the consumer decision making process, it starts with problem recognition, or you need something. So that starts off the trend. Then working through, what do you do then? Searching for the opportunities, seeing what is there in terms of the suggested products or services that you're looking for. Then you're evaluating the alternatives that are there. Then you're making the choice. Then at the end, you're assessing that choice. How was it? How did it work out? Was it beneficial? Did it meet your needs based on how they marketed it to you and when you needed it for whatever purpose that was required? Things to consider as we go through. So always an evaluation at the end. So the consumer purchasing process consists of all that. We've got a little video here which just talks about how consumers and their triggers can be triggered based on advertising. But here's another aspect. Are consumers, is it a need or is it a want? Very different. And a lot of times advertising taps into people to understand if that is a key want, how we can market to them at the right time to make sure that they engage and they respond just exactly the way we need them to. So thinking about it in terms of physical, social, physiological, how many of these different types of aspects in terms of the purchasing process and what you go through and thinking about these. Next up, internal search. When you're thinking about it, how many different times you already understand what potential alternatives or products or brands are available. How do you handle that search? Do you reach out to people internally that you know? Do you consider the alternatives yourself and think about what you've used in the past, what's been recommended to you, what's worked, what hasn't worked? So brand equity and brand awareness are key when you're considering the internal search. Moving forth, the external search, and external searches have expanded. Why? Online. Think about it now. You're going in to purchase a TV. Nowadays, you have all the information at your fingertips. You can do an online search. You can understand every single one of the models. So before you go into, say, a Best Buy, you are more of an informed consumer than that salesperson has ever seen before. And nowadays, with technology, there's things like quick response codes. And you can actually scan a code on that computer, on that TV, to see real live feedback about what people are saying about how well that TV performed. Was it worth the price? Any other aspects? How was the sales service on it? So the external search has expanded so much, and you'll see a little bit more in this video. And of course, the consumer attitude. And these are three key aspects. Feel, think, do. Affective, how we feel about things. Cognitive, what we think, and conative, what we do. Now this layer of all of these phases does not have to occur in one way. You can do something, then feel something, then think something, but most of the time, marketers want to encourage you to feel something, and then think about it, and then take action with your purchase. So an example of that, once again, as we went through, standard versus trial and error. The standard way in terms of how you're feeling, thinking, and doing something versus conative. You did something, then you're going to think about it, then maybe you'll feel something about it. So think about the different experiences that you may have, whether it's purchasing something every day or an experience through a service, through a hotel, through any of your experiences in the consumer process, and see what your sequence of thought is. And considering this great advertisement from Pampers Wipes, and some things can be rough. Her wipes shouldn't be. So what are they trying to do? They're trying to have you maybe think about some things that are rough, then feel her wipe, a baby's wipe, should not be, and then do, looking at Pampers as the solution to that. It's as simple as that. Moving on, the role of marketing and messages in terms of how we really want people to think about it. So take this for example. we've got the current linkage, right? So you see a lemon in this, but you see a lemon that looks a little differently. They're trying to convey and personify that lemon for you to think about it differently, to categorize it differently, to really assume that instead of normally putting salt on top of foods, perhaps you put lemon. It's got similar flavoring, but guess what? It's healthier. What's the thought process and sequence when you consider that? The current linkage, it's a lemon in terms of how you'd normally utilize it. How can we modify it? How did they do this? Looking at the lemon, putting the salt cap imagery to really have people think about this a little different than they ever thought about lemons in before, and then hopefully doing, maybe encouraging them to take less salt in their diet and more other ways to enhance foods and flavorings. B2B marketing. People often say this, and we talk about this a lot. So business to business. So the example that you'll see is the lemons example, right? The woman who went into the store and purchased lemons, made lemonade, and her and her husband are having lemonade. That's great. That's B2C. The business sold those lemons directly to the consumer, and she made it for her and her husband. But the little boy, on the other hand, purchased those lemons, made lemonade, and then sold it to consumers. That's B2B in the simplest format. Other forms of B2B, you may do this in your own work, is Virginia Tech. We have to purchase computers. We will work with Apple, HP, we'll all do requests for proposals, and we'll determine what the best company is based on the price and our needs to purchase that. That is direct B2B exchange. B2B and B2C, we say, no longer truly exists. All we really know about is people to people. Because isn't this true? Whether you're a person that is a purchaser of procurement for Virginia Tech, the person you reach out to is another person. It's B2B and it's a business relationship, but it's still people to people. The same as B2C, that consumer goes into Kroger or A&P or wherever and purchases those lemons, it's still people working with people. And that's the most important aspect, not to isolate these terms, but to really understand how fluid they are in the world that we live in today. So looking at B2B markets, you've got resellers, institutions such as Virginia Tech. Resellers could be something along the lines of Etsy, aspects such as that. You purchase things, you may sell them online. Institutions, Virginia Tech, government, state officials, of course, and of course manufacturers and service providers. All of these can be potential B2B markets. Looking at it a little bit deeper, where academia is, where government is, where industry is, and how they all make up the B2B markets and some of the products that they purchase on a daily basis. Buying center, consider this. The buying center when you're in B2B, it can be started by the initiator. It can be started by one person, such as somebody who really wants the latest in terms of a software. And it can be someone who may heard about it, may utilize it, but there's an initiator who brings this up. But then it goes through the whole process, and you have to understand the core buyer who's actually making that purchase. It may not be the same person that actually uses it on a daily basis, but that's the decision maker. That's the one you have to influence. But you have to understand all the people that go around it, the gatekeeper, or procurement, the one that may look at a couple of different options. A, B, and C. Which version is best? What's the best price? Based on the needs. So going through all of these and understanding the roles is critical. So the culture of an organization. Every organization is different. So whether we're talking about the culture of Virginia Tech and how to work here, or the culture of Coca-Cola or Nike, it all differs, the roles, but we all know that within them there's all B2B. So when you think about it, whether the culture of your organization is democratic in terms of how things get decided, if it is consultative, if it's a consensus, or if it's autocratic. Democratic, the majority rules. Consultative, one person to make a decision but solicits input from everybody else. Consensus, all members of the team reach one consensus. And autocratic, maybe multiple participants, but one person and one person alone makes the decision. Different types of cultures based on the organization that you may be in. B2B, considering straight rebuy. So what does that mean, a straight rebuy? Every year, Virginia Tech purchases our copiers from Xerox. Every year, we continue to purchase those copiers. Next up, a modified rebuy. Instead of just the normal copier, Mr. Xerox, I want a copier and a scanner. A little bit of a modified on that buy. Or a brand new task. Instead of copiers at all, we're getting rid of all copiers. We're just going to use these new computers or software to scan. That's exactly what it is. B2B sales cycle, the pain point. 9 out of 10 business buyers say when they are ready to buy, they will find you. But how do you build a relationship? Research. 81% of B2B start the process with a web. But also, the biggest and most powerful, word of mouth, especially in B2B. They recognize and they respect the word of mouth of an influencer or authority that said, I already purchased this, it worked well. That's kind of third-party credibility. This is where it works into. And then, of course, the negotiation, and then you have the purchase. This is an entire B2B sales cycle. Very simplified, but this is basically the process that it takes. And just to look at both sectors, the consumer buying process versus the B2B buying process. Very similar in terms of the process, but different roles within. In your process, the consumer buying process, there's problem recognition. In the B2B process, there is identification of needs. Something is needed. So on the consumer side, you may have a problem, but on the company side, they need something. Going through the same process for the consumer, it's information search, it's alternatives, it's purchase, and it's evaluations. For the B2B, it's identification of needs, then specifying what those are, then putting out, then identifying vendors, putting out a request for proposal, then selecting the vendor, and then of course, purchase negotiations, and at the end, post-purchase evaluation. How well did your decision work? Did it meet the goals of the overall intent of the purchase and the overall corporation? And that's it for this chapter on B2B and B2C. I'll see you next time where we'll continue to go over exciting and interesting marketing and the experiences that exist daily.